It's Beer O'Clock, and this is the Beer O'Clock Show, where every week we take a selected beer and rejoice in its beery goodness. My name is Mark, and joining me is Cannonball, Steve. Hello, Steve.
Evening, how you doing?
I'm doing very well, Cannonball. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very excited.
How many
Although by the
sleeps?
time this goes out, how many sleeps? Well, it's one of those things again, isn't it? As we record tonight, it's 3 more sleeps. But by the time people listen to this, I would have been well and truly cannonballed.
Yeah.
Um,
As we said
and
last week,
yeah,
it's the Unhuman Cannonball release this Thursday night. Steve's
it
gonna
is.
drink more than his fair share. He's gonna drink my share as well because I'm not gonna be there. So you're gonna be. There's a photo of you on Twitter from when you're in a cannonball-a-thon up in Sheffield on the Sheffield Crawl, with you passed out on a bed with a
Yes.
jersey on with hobo written on the front. That's basically gonna be you Friday morning.
Well, considering that was on the standard cannonball,
Yeah.
although that was after 2 pints of cannonball, at the end of a full day's drinking, which was never the best idea. But yeah, Thursday night's all about the big one, the 11% triple IPA that's being released. Yeah, there might be a similar photo of me maybe in a shop doorway in London after missing the last train home or something like that.
Well, if you do miss your last train home, mate, give me a call and I'll come and collect you.
You might need to actually.
Right, we'll hear more about that in next week's show, no doubt. Also joining us this week is London-based beer blogger and co-author of the new 100 Best Breweries in the World Craft Beer Guide bookazine thing, available in finer newsagents near you. It's Chris Hall. Hello, Chris.
Hi guys, pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you, mate. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm very well. I'm looking forward to trying the beer with you guys this evening. I think it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, from what you were saying before we started recording, it's going to be very interesting indeed. Right, Chris, before we get into the body of the show, why don't you tell us a little bit about this beer guide you've written, or rather the best breweries in the world guide, which I did see in the newsagents on the weekend, by the way. So it is out there, and also a little bit about what you do in general.
Well, generally speaking, I write about beer on my blog, The Beer Diary, and I generally write about stuff that's going on in London because obviously, as you guys both know, it's such a thriving beer scene here at the moment. I also write about any beer that I come across in my travels around the UK, things that I think are happening and I think are worth commenting on. And it was actually last year when myself and another blogger, Craig Heap, were given the opportunity to write a beer guide for future publishing. And that was the first issue of Craft Beer, which was the 365 best beers in the world. And when we wrote that, that was a serious undertaking which took place over about 6 weeks, basically splitting the workload right down the middle, which, as you can imagine, is quite a lot of beers to write about and indeed thoroughly research, shall we say, in the course of a month to 6 weeks. The new issue, which is the 100 best breweries in the world, is a kind of a logical follow-up to that, where we sort of go a bit deeper and look where all this amazing beer is made and who makes it, where that is, and sort of beer cultures and fantastic breweries in different countries around the world. And yeah, the new magazine is out now. And in this issue, me and Craig needed a bit of a backup. We needed some reinforcements because it was an even larger undertaking than the previous issue. So we got the help of Matthew Curtis, who you may know on Twitter as Total Curtis, who writes the Total Ales beer blog, and a chap who me and Craig have written with before on our previous website reviews, a guy called Rory O'Toole. And we also got help from esteemed Yorkshire beer writer Lee Linley, who does the Good Stuff beer blog. So it was a real team effort, this one, and we're very happy with what we've done. We're very proud of what we've created.
Chris, how long have you been beer blogging for?
My blog as it stands has been going for about, I guess, just over 2 years. Prior to that, I'd had various sort of little attempts at starting a blog and what I wanted to do, and it never quite really working the way I wanted it to. I tried doing it in different scenarios, place where I'd lived before. I used to live in Leeds, and for a while I lived in India, and I tried to do a little blog writing about beers I come across there, but sadly the beer scene just wasn't as interesting as in India as I'd hoped it would be. It wasn't until I came back to London and finally managed to marry my two passions of beer and writing together. And it was a perfect storm, really, because when I came back to London in 2000 and end of 2010, beginning of 2011, that was when things really started happening. That was when you couldn't find a railway arch without a brewery underneath it.
Yeah.
So it's been fantastic for me. It's really helps me progress as a beer writer, really, seeing London evolve into what it is now, and simply the fact that we can you guys can talk about a new beer or a new brewery almost every week for as long as you could ever want to. I think it's testament to that.
Yeah, I mean, we started this almost 2 years ago, and there was a decent craft scene then, but we were kind of relying on supermarket staples quite a bit to pad the show out. But now, we don't ever have to review a beer that you can generally get in Tesco's now. You can There's this shitload of beer to review. We will never get to the end of it. We're trying, but it's going to take a lot of work.
Yeah, well, it's sort of, people say to me, "What's your favourite beer?" And I'm like, "Well, I haven't had them all yet, but I'm working on it. I'm working on it."
What's your favourite style of beer?
Oh, again, just as difficult a question, really. I think it really depends what mood you're in. I often find now if I go to a bar where I'm going to try a few different beers and with friends that are in a similar kind of mood, I end up starting on one particular style maybe and then kind of moving along to something else. I might start out something relatively easygoing like a golden ale or a traditional pale ale or bitter, and then get increasingly more ambitious in terms of flavours and ABV until I end up somewhere quite insane, what I like to call ridiculous beers. As soon as the ridiculous beers come out, then things have gotten quite serious.
Right.
As I'm sure Steve will attest on Thursday, where he will be starting with a ridiculous beer.
Yeah.
So,
I'm going to do it in reverse this week. Yeah, I'm starting at the top and working back.
Well, it's interesting though you say that, because having said that, talking about working my way through different beers over the course of a session, the beer that we're going to be reviewing now is what I would call a game changer, because I find that a beer like a Kernel's London Sour can be used to kind of break up a session in some ways. If you think your palate has become clogged by hops or by really high ABV imperial stouts, something like that, and you think, oh, I don't know where to go from here, you can just have like a really light sour beer like that, and it can kind of just reset your palate. It's like a hard reset, Control Alt Delete, and you can start all over again with something completely different.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying it'll stop you from being as drunk as you were, but it'll certainly help you feel like you can drink a lot more different kinds of beer. So in that regard, at least, it's a fantastic style.
See, now that would be a truly amazing beer that somebody needs to brew. The beer that stops you from being drunk.
The unbeer, yeah.
Yeah.
Just wait for the Brewdog detox. I'm sure it'll come out.
Yeah. Tactical nuclear detox. I look forward to it.
The marketing campaign coming to you soon. Right, let's get on with the main body of the show. Steve, do you have any news for us this week, mate?
Yes, I do. I've got a few bits. Okay, so a few bits this week. A couple of updates on some new beers that are heading your way. First is a re-release of a beer that came out last year. Adnams are releasing their Fat Sprat Amber beer again. 3.8% beer brewed in support of the Marine Conservation Society. Will now be available through spring, early summer. It's amber ale brewed with pale ale, malted barley, Munich, Cara, and black malt, with Columbus, English Goldings, Cascade, and Chinook hops.
It's not a bad beer, that.
No, it was quite a nice beer. We tried that last year, didn't we? So that's back. It'll be available in selected pubs until September, and the 5-litre mini casks will be available to buy with it in as well.
Yep.
So that's Adnams Fat Sprat. Then another one I picked up this week. Bristol Beer Factory are introducing a new what they're calling unlimited range. The limited edition beers released every 2 months and are purely for the beer enthusiast, stroke geek, or wanker. as we like to suggest sometimes. They're only available once in a 30-litre keg, 750ml cork and cage, or 330ml bottle. So the first one to be released is a double IPA, which is released week commencing the 14th of April on keg and the 28th of April on bottle. That will be followed in June by a Belgian rye, and then followed in July by a wheat wine. For more information on that, bristolbeerfactory.co.uk. And then finally, just we mentioned a few weeks ago the Nicholson's Spring Beer Festival. I randomly got a letter out of nowhere from them. Apparently, I'm a member of the Hop Circle, which isn't quite as exciting as the Magic Circle, I think. But basically, I got a little card which gives me like a free beer or something like that.
Oh, that's
but
nice.
10% off of cask ales during the festival as well. So I've got a free beer and 10% off of their cask ales during the festival. It's free to join the Hop Circle. Just go to nicholsonspubs.co.uk and sign up there. And that's the end of the news
That's
this
the end
week.
of the news. Okay, well, let's
Yes.
get on to this week's featured...
And of course,
Yep.
the big news this week, which will be unnews by Friday, is obviously the release of Unhuman Cannonball on Thursday.
Yes. At the craft beer company in Islington is where you're going.
It is. But I'm going to probably struggle to shut me up about that one next week.
Cool. Okay, well, let's get on to this week's beer. This is another London brewery, but this is kind of like a cheeky entry to this season's beer list because it wasn't something that was planned. Steve and I happened to be in the... What's the name of the shop we were in?
Sourced Market
Sourced
in St
Market.
Pancras.
Yeah, that's right, because we were there for something else. Saw this and we decided, hey, let's put that on the show. So this is a beer from the London brewery called the Kernel. And it is a 2.7% ABV, I'm very pleased to say. London Sour is what it is. Now, do you want to... Let's just crack this open and then we can talk about the beer and the brewery and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, let's do that.
All right.
Is yours 2.7?
Yeah?
Oh, so it's me that's the odd one out there.
It's just you.
Yeah.
Why, what's yours?
Mine's 2.5. So
Ah,
I've clearly got a different batch.
oh, that's interesting. Right.
You probably just got the last bottle they had of the
Ooh.
last batch. And we
Yeah.
managed to get
That
it.
has got a peculiar aroma to it.
So,
Oh, it's very pale. and fizzy.
Practically see through.
It's like
It's-
lemony.
It's almost champagne-like in appearance.
Definitely, it's. I think the word is effervescent.
Yeah.
That's a good comparison to make champagne. I think actually, it's
Yeah.
astoundingly pale. Like it's barely a colour. I mean, it's it's like lemon juice. That incredibly pale.
Yeah, it looks like
soft.
lemon squash.
Yeah. So it's like the stuff you buy in the bottle to put on your pancakes on Pancake Day.
Okay.
And there's definitely some lemon going on in the aroma, a little bit of grapefruit, but also a slight sort of creamy, almost not unpleasant yogurty scent to it, which we might expect from a sour beer this kind. Kernel's London Sour, I believe, is based on it's their sort of take on a Berliner Weiss, which is, as you might imagine, a sort of Berlin beer style, which does use wheat like a Weiss beer, but to a much lower proportion. It's brewed with, it's fermented with quite a less aggressive yeast than a traditional wheat beer, and uses lactobacillus, which is the sort of bacteria that you would find in your sort of lambic beers and that sort of thing. So it's producing a deliberate sort of sour character to it. But obviously they haven't called it a Berliner Weiss, they've called it London Sour. They've tried to make it their own thing, but that's broadly the kind of thing that it's based on.
Oh, now we know where we've got Chris on the show, Steve.
Yeah, I was going to say I think that right there is probably one of the best pre-descriptors we've ever had of a beer on this show.
Well, I'm just glad I can help.
It's certainly better than the Mark's back of the bottle intro or my sudden quick rush for the website to read something off of the brewery's website about it.
Here's
You
my
would
back
be
of the bottle.
struggling to get any information off the back of the bottle on
Yeah,
this.
here's my
This
back of the
is-
bottle description of London Sour. Contains wheat. There we go.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Which is it's not exactly verbose, but that's very much Kernel style. I guess they really do let the beer do the talking.
Yeah, it does have a very interesting aroma to it. You can get that sourness a little bit, and
Yeah, it's
the grapefruit.
sort
Like you
of
said. I can't get the yogurt.
it's like appley notes to it, and it does remind me of. It does make me think of champagne. It's not quite the intense bubbles of intense carbonation of champagne, but it's certainly along those lines.
Yeah.
Um,
Shall we get into it?
yeah.
Yeah, let's give it a go.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers. Oh my word, it's refreshing.
That is incredibly refreshing.
It's one of those beers that it punches so far above its weight in terms of ABV. It's quite amazing, really.
That's actually stunningly refreshing.
That's really nice. Actually, quite like that.
It's not actually as sour in terms of tartness that I've had from other ones of theirs before, which is interesting. I think it's actually I've had a version of it with raspberry, which was absolutely beautiful, but had a much more pronounced tart kind of character to it. And I'm thinking that was just as much from the raspberries, perhaps, as it was from the sort of sour style itself.
Yeah, it is a bit puckering, but compared to other beers, but I guess that's just the style.
Yeah, and I think it's very accessible. I've had Berliner Weiss. The last time I had a sort of a Berliner Weiss style that was brewed over here was sorry, that was a slightly gassy beer. Is Brewdog and Brody's collaboration. They did a Berliner Weiss, which I had at Brewdog Camden, and it was so fresh. I think they brewed it with some kind of Scottish berries, if I recall right. And that was absolutely insanely sour. I could see people like ordering it out of curiosity, not really knowing what it is, and then having one go of it and being like, "What the hell is this in my face? What's happening to me?" This is far more elegant and refined, I would say. Actually, it's remarkably easy to drink.
It's very easy to drink, and it's what's surprising is that how carbonated it was when it came out of the bottle. That's not coming through as you're drinking it. You're not overpowered by the carbonation. It's just adding to the as you said at the beginning. It's a real game changer. This is cleansing the palate completely, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. This is what I'm saying. Imagine having like a really, like your classic heavy American like double IPA that's sort of not just like with a big on the hops in terms of bitterness stuff, but quite an almost cloying sweetness to it that's only balanced out by just alcohol and just intense hot bombs exploding all of your palate and thinking, where can I can't just have another one of these. I'm going to explode. I need something. I need to rein this back in. This is when you reach for beers like this and you can just go, oh, actually everything's fine again. I can try something completely different now. I can now go stout or to red ale or go anywhere from here. I think that although I do generally find that they're actually very moorish in and of themselves, because they are just so light and crisp, and they just, in many ways, it makes the last beer you had before it feel kind of clumsy and flabby by comparison, because you think, oh, I didn't need all of that alcohol and the sweetness going on. All I wanted is something that's just really refreshing, and you just think that this is just something, another one of those magical things that beer can do. It can be so many different things.
Yeah. Low ABV beers are not something that the Kernel's known for. Is this typical of the style of a sour beer? The low ABV? Is it just something
for a
you've gone
Berliner Weiss, yes, they're typically below 3%.
Okay.
They're like sort of a traditional sort of everyday beer that was like many sort of your more esoteric German beer styles. They were very hugely popular locally, and then there was sort of like as the sort of trend for pale lager became more and more popular, they kind of died away a little bit. You have a similar kind of story with like sort of Kolsch beers of Cologne and Alt beers, Dusseldorf. But because the locals are very protective of those styles, as well as enjoying beers that were very popular, like lager, they tend to be, they tend to try and keep the scene alive in some way. I guess you could compare it to kind of like cask ales and stuff in this country. They were very proud of, I think in Berlin, of this kind of style of beer, though I don't think it's from there originally. That's where it's most famous, being drunk. And now I think there's a kind of revival of the scene. Although I think in Germany, it's quite common for people to drink it with like a sort of fruits kind of syrup into it to kind of balance it out, because not everybody has the refined craft wanker palate that the three of us have. Some people might find it a little bit extreme, but I think it's quite a wonderful style, and I think it shows a kind of open-minded attitude of the Kernel that they're not just about the IPAs and ports and stuff. They can actually turn their hands to anything.
Yeah, Steve, what do you think of it, mate?
I'm really enjoying it. I'm really enjoying the sourness. I'm really enjoying the tartness that it gives you. Every now and again, I get a kick like somebody's crushed a packet of refreshers up in their hand and then forced their fist into my mouth and rubbed it all around the inside of my mouth. But
it's a little lemon sherbety, isn't it?
Yeah, in the best way possible. That
yeah.
And as Chris said, you could just see yourself just going back again and again and again, and just sitting thinking, I'm wondering if this 2.5, 2.7 is ever actually going to hit me.
Yeah. Well, like you were saying, Chris, I can imagine this. You spend a couple of hours on stouts or your black beers, and then you have one of these, and that cleanses everything, and then you can get on to another style.
It just takes you all the way back to square one in terms of like your kind of like the heaviness on your palate and stuff, and you just have to start all over again. I mean, it's just got. It's one of those beer styles that I think at first seems this is just so simple and straightforward. It's only got a few different aspects to it, but as you return to it with each sip, you think actually there's something else going on here. Like Steve talks about the sherbetiness, which I think you pick up on after a little while, and you start to get this kind of like sort of like apple, almost like apple skins, and sort of like this kind of white grape kind of juice kind of character to it. It's definitely getting closer and closer to what people would normally describe as a wine. I think it's definitely approaching like white wine sort of territory.
Yeah, when I first poured it out, I got the sense of a sour wine type initial aroma off it. But Steve, we lost you mid-flow, mate.
Yeah, no, I'd finished my flow, and was waiting for somebody to comment, and the comment never came.
Oh.
Experiencing real technical difficulties here at the field office this evening.
Chris, I'm going to go back to your book for a little bit, mate.
Sure.
In a few weeks, I'm off to Australia.
Right.
What are some Aussie breweries that I should look up while I'm there? Because there's quite a few pubs, because I'm staying in Brisbane, and there's quite a few pubs there that specialise in stocking a wide range of craft beers from Australia. I'm just looking for what's something I should look out for.
Yeah, the scene in Australia is certainly booming at the moment. As I understand it, it's also heavily kind of localized in some ways, that you'll almost always find like a local brewery, but not quite to the sort of density as you might find here.
Yeah.
But you're almost always going to find a local brew of some kind. We just didn't have enough space in the magazine when we were limited. You think of 100 breweries as a big number, but it's actually incredibly limiting when you really get into the meat of like talking about, oh, I love this brewer and I love this brewer, and we could have really gone to town on that whole area of the world, really. But in the end, we only had space for one major Australian brewery and 2 New Zealand ones. The Australian one we went for is Little Creatures,
okay.
which is a kind of a household name nowadays. As you may know, which you guys interviewed Alex from Camden Town Brewery. He previously worked for Little Creatures.
Oh, right, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and one of his jobs was really sort of like turning the Little Creatures Pale Ale, their famous Pale Ale, into the sort of like the kind of standard, the new kind of standard for like sort of Aussie Pale Ales, really. And I think that comes across in Camden's pale ale to some extent. He's really going for it in terms of, you know, diversity of hop character and that sort of thing. Unfortunately, the problem is Australian beers here are never quite as fresh as they should be.
No.
Which is why you can come across disappointing bottles of stuff, even like Little Creatures. But another brewery I would say is really great out there and that people do rave about here is Stone and Wood. Their Pacific Pale, for example, I had recently at Camden because they've got a little like import-export arrangement with Camden.
I think they're in Byron Bay, aren't they? Northern New South Wales?
Yes, I think that's right, yeah.
Hey, I know something. Whee.
Well done.
First time for everything.
No, I think that's right, yeah. They're a great brewery. They make some really nice pale ales, so they're definitely worth a look in. It was in fact only the other day I actually got an email from somebody in Australia about the last issue, the 365 best beers in the world, and he was telling me how he was working his way through the magazine. He was trying as many beers as he could from what we'd selected, but because so many of the ones that we put in there were from the UK and the US, he was like, I just can't get hold of some of these beers. These Beavertown beers, they sound amazing, but I just can't get them over here. And he was like, you should really do some more like Australian ones. And basically, I've had to reply to the guy saying, well, we have the same problem. We don't see enough of your beers here for us to write in detail about it. So I guess the only logical solution is to go out there and write a whole new magazine, I guess.
Is that your pitch right there? Is it? Is that
yes,
where you're trying to go?
For anybody who's listening, anybody who wants to pay for me to fly to and live in Australia drinking beer for, I'll take a month, maybe 2 months. I reckon I could have a good hack at it. You know, just putting it out there.
Well,
by all means, check out Little Creatures and Stone and Woods. Those are the ones I can heartily recommend. But there are much more well-informed people on Twitter who you can ask the same questions to and get some more local answers.
I'll be doing my best to bring us back some souvenirs, Stephen, for tasting purposes.
Excellent. Just make sure they're well packaged.
I will. Yeah, they'll be packed in the suitcase full of all the clothes my wife plans on buying.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm nearly getting to the bottom of my glass. This is a lovely beer.
It's just so easy, isn't it? You could quite easily spend an evening, an afternoon, just merrily drinking this away.
I think I would space it out with some other stuff because it is, like I said, quite sour. Compared to what else you would be drinking.
I think it's definitely it's one of those kind of styles that's best enjoyed less often, because that way you never get tired of it. And it can actually be very useful to you as well as just enjoyable.
Yeah. Right, well, I'm finished mine. I'm happy to say. I tapped that in. I got a badge because it's National Beer Day.
Oh, excellent!
Maybe
there are badges today, are there?
Yeah, so get your taps in on Untapped.
Chris, get your sash out. Get your craft sash out. Chris and I have got this idea of like that they're doing like some scout movements around the world, and the brownies have a little sash where you can actually sew real badges on to just prove how much of a craft wanker you are when you go into a bar.
Yeah, it's the wanker sash. It's quite
right.
Yeah, it's just a wanker sash. It's just a conventional. I think I see it as quite being sort of rustic, artisanal, maybe some like maybe made from Hessian, perhaps.
Yeah.
Or maybe some red denim, maybe if you already want to go for the full on.
Yeah, but still called a wanker sash.
Yeah,
you really saw it.
Yeah. See, I'm thinking I might debut mine on Thursday evening.
Why not?
At the Unhuman Cannonball launch.
I'm sure everyone will understand.
King Wanker.
Get yourself a little wanker crown.
Yeah.
I've just now got an image of CCTV footage of Steve in a sort of hastily constructed crown and sash wandering up like the city road. Just sort of down the middle of the road, the bottle of Unhuman Cannonball in each hand, just sort of like hurling obscenities at the heavens.
All hail the king.
Oh, very good.
Well, I look forward to reading about that in the papers.
Do you guys have any final words on the London Sour from Kernel?
it's. I think aside from just being a delicious beer, I think it's also a really great entry for people into the whole sort of area of sour beers. I think actual straight up lambics and Gurzes and those kind of more intense Belgian varieties can be a little bit daunting to people because they tend to come in bottles that are coming from overseas. You're not sure if you're going to want to spend that much money on it. Something you're not sure about. People get led towards fruit beers and maybe they only like the fruit aspect of it. But I think if you really want to try something that's sour and accessible and incredibly refreshing, I think, you know, if you can get something like that locally, as you can do now, from guys like the Kernel, who obviously have an impeccable reputation, then I think it can only be a good thing. It can only encourage more people to try those kind of styles.
Cool. Stephen?
I suppose just to echo some of what Chris has said there. I mean, I've recently probably just started getting into sours in the last 6 months ago or so, and that they are nice just to throw in every now and again, just for a refresher. But much like Chris has just mentioned there, I've always been put off by not actually understanding what the label says and not being 100% sure if I'm buying the right thing. But something like this, you know, it does what it says on the bottle, really, doesn't it? It's a sour beer from London. Yeah. Really enjoyable, really refreshing, really cleanses the palate. Yeah, a really enjoyable beer. I'd say give this one a go. If you see it on the shelves, pick it up and give it a go.
Indeed. I echo the exact same sentiments. It's a lovely beer. 2.7 or 2.5%, depending on where you get it from or what batch you get. Very drinkable indeed. Chris, before we let you go, I tend to ask this question lately of anyone who's from London.
Oh, right. Okay.
Because you are a London boy. What's your favourite pub in London other than the Brewdog Shepherd's Bush and the Southampton Arms? Because everyone mentions those.
I didn't think there were any other pubs in London apart from those two. I thought those were the only two pubs that. Those are the only two pubs that the crap wankers get let into. Maybe that's why they're so popular. No, they're both incredible pubs. The Southampton Arms is only down the road from me, and Brewdog Shepherd's Bush is obviously quite the temple. Quite the temple for those interested in beer at the moment. I would probably have to say. My favourite from last year, my golden pints, was the Craft Beer Co in Islington. Mainly because I'd met so many great beer people there last year. In fact, it was at the Unhuman Cannibal launch last year that I met a whole bunch of amazing beer people all at once. And all of those people that I met, I'm still friends with now, and so it's not just a great place for beer, but also it's got a nice, cozier, pubbier feel than I think some of the other craft beer co's, and I think that's what brings people back. It's a nice place to be, not just a nice place to drink.
Yeah, it is a nice little pub, yeah. Right.
And Steve will obviously, be
Bard.
Exploring it thoroughly.
Yes, it does. I just agree. It's got a lovely homely feel to it. I took some non-beer friends there recently, and that they both commented on just the atmosphere and how nice it was in there, and it just didn't have that edge that you get from most kind of standard boozers, and they both thoroughly enjoyed the experience of being in there. However, I'm not sure I'd take anyone this week that wasn't really into their beer, because I do think it's going to be wall-to-wall wanker on Thursday evening.
Again, in the nicest possible sense.
In the nicest possible sense. I do feel as though we do have to keep reiterating the fact that when we use the term wanker, we are using it in an affectionate way, not in an offensive way.
It's been a huge pleasure to me watching the term being used more and more ever since myself and a few other guys started using it. It was last year in Edinburgh at the Beer Bloggers Conference. It started getting bandied around. Nobody knows who said it first, but it just became the word of the moment. And then it just it's taken on a life of its own, really. And now I think it sounds silly because, unlike maybe like a lot of it's not the saying like a beer geek. It's got a kind of self-mocking sense of humour to it, which I mean, it sounds silly to say that of something which is ostensibly an insult, but I think it actually demonstrates a kind of maturity in the British beer scene now that we're happy, if not proud, to say not just, oh, he's being a wanker, saying, I am a craft wanker. I admit that. I've come to terms with it.
It's a badge I'm proud to wear.
I've yet
sash.
to label myself as one.
Yeah.
I haven't reached those heights yet. Anyway, let's wrap this up. Chris, we can find you on Twitter at CSHallWriter.
That's right.
And your website, The Beer Diary, is at beerdiary.wordpress.com. And your book is...
thebeerdiary.wordpress.com, yeah. And you can find details about the new magazines and where to buy them online and on iTunes as well.
And your bookazine, The 100 Best Breweries in the World, Craft Beer Guide, is out at final newsagents near you.
It is indeed.
We are on Twitter at Beer O'Clock Show, and the website is beeroclockshow.co.uk. You can subscribe to us through iTunes or Stitcher. Give us a review, give us a thumbs up, because it really does help, and we appreciate your support. Stephen.
Yes.
What is on next week, mate?
Next week we are reviewing Thornbridge Sequoia.
Ooh.
I think it's pronounced.
That'll do.
It's an American Amber Ale, one of their recent releases.
Interesting. Okay, and we'll have a full and comprehensive report of what you can remember on the Unhuman Cannonball launch the night before.
Yeah, you might have a full and comprehensive report of the first 5 minutes, and that's about it, probably.
Just CCTV footage for the rest of it.
Yes, yeah, stuff from the BBC News.
Yeah. Right, okay, that's it. Thank you very much, Chris, for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure to be with you. I've enjoyed having a drink with you and chatting.
And Steve,
Thanks, Chris.
Steve, I will talk to you next week.
Yeah, chat to you next week, mate.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.